Okay, so my formal good morning to everybody. I think everybody here knows who I am, but I am Michelle. I'm going to be facilitating today. And so I will get started on that. So, first, I'm going to read Racism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person to person communication to show that we are committed to treating fellow human beings of all colors with love and respect. Join us. Also, Erase is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in acceptance of all people, and no personal attacks of any kind will be tolerated. We come with an intention to listen, learn, and not to argue. And I'm going to read our land acknowledgement, and that is especially important today given our topic. We begin today by acknowledging that what we know as the United States is the ancestral and unceded territory of many indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named here. Members of our meeting group today are on the lands of the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Tonkawan, Lipan, Apache, and Comanche in Austin, the Lenape and Piscataway in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, the Chewelah and Mojave in Riverside, and the Lumbee in Fayetteville. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. We need to protect and honor the history and peoples of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are still on indigenous land, and it will always be indigenous land. So I now think we're going to go through and have everybody briefly introduce themselves, as is our normal routine here. So I'm going to go in the order that I see people on the screen here for me, and that would be starting with Phyllis.
Good morning, I'm Phyllis, and I've been coming to Erace since 2008, and I'm in New Orleans.
Thanks, Phyllis. Beatrice?
Hi, good morning. I've been coming to Erace since 1994 in New Orleans, and right now I'm in New York, waiting to see a play with Wendell Phillips. Glad to be here, glad to see all of you.
Oh, wow, fun. Thanks,
Wendell
Beatrice.
Pierce.
Well, thanks for joining us, even though you're not in your native land there of Atlanta.
Right. Good.
Well, thanks. Okay. Next is Larry.
Good morning, I'm Larry. I've been affiliated with the race since about 1995. Glad to be here this morning, and I'll be signing out a little early.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know. Thanks, Larry. Richard.
Morning, Richard in New Orleans. Been with Erace since the beginning, and it is hard to believe we're coming up on 30 years of Erace, but I guess we are. When you mentioned 1993. Wow. Okay.
Glad to have you here this morning. Thanks. Louise.
Hey, Louise here. Been coming to Erace for over a couple of decades. First in New Orleans, now in Austin. Sorry, obviously a little
The
bit.
founding member of Austin.
Yeah, right, there you go. And Wendell Pierce, that is very cool. He is a very cool guy and actor. Enjoy.
Thanks, Louise. Nora.
Good morning, everybody. I'm in Austin. I've been coming for about a year and always learn something. Thanks.
Thank you. Teresa.
Good morning. I'm Teresa, and I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've been coming, I think, since August of this year.
Welcome again. Thank you. Marla.
Yes, good morning. I'm Marla. I'm here in the New Orleans area as well. Been coming for the last couple of years or so.
Marva.
Good morning. My name is Marva. I've been coming to Erace post-Katrina. I look forward to this lively discussion every Saturday.
Thank you, Marva. It's good to have you here today, too. Francie?
Hi. Oh goodness, frog got in. I'm in Austin and I've been part of the group for about 2 years, and I've enjoyed everybody's opinions, ideas, and experiences. Sharing that is.
Thanks. Glenn.
Peace be on to everyone. Name is Glenn Abdullah, and I've been coming since 1994. Looking forward to this morning discussion.
Thanks, Glenn. And wow, we have Pedro here. I just saw him come on. If you can hear me, Pedro, we're going through the introductions, and you are last to join. So, and I've made it through everybody. Go ahead.
Apologies for being so late. What are we doing? I'm in Austin. Been coming to Erace for I think about 3 years now, or anyhow, not long enough. Anyhow, thanks for having me.
Glad you could join us. We were just talking about you early, Pedro, so your ears must have been burning. Glad you could be here. So that's everybody I see that's joined us so far. We may have some more coming in late. Who knows? We'll see. So I'm going to go over the format of the meeting just so we are sure we understand. Please be sure you're on mute when it's not your turn to speak. And I will be keeping a list of who is speaking as usual. And be sure, remember to raise one finger, kind of wave it around a little bit just to make sure that I can see your finger. You've acknowledged, and I'll try and acknowledge you quietly, even if somebody's speaking, and put your name on the list. You will have 2 minutes to speak, and they will go in turn of the list that I keep. Please do not interrupt the speaker. There are no side comments to others, no personal attacks, no name calling. As discussed before, the point of the discussion is to listen, learn, and not to argue back and forth. And then if you have a clarifying question, if there's something you do not understand that the speaker is talking about, then you would raise 2 fingers. And at the end of the speaker that's speaking, that you need the clarification of, I would call on you to ask your clarifying question. And again, a clarifying question is something that you don't understand, maybe that the speaker has explained or said a word. So examples of, I didn't understand what you meant by a word or a term, or can you clarify for what you meant by a specific term or sentence you may have spoken. So they're not questions. The questions are not to further your opinion about what the speaker may be speaking on. If you would like to add your own opinion to something the speaker has said, then you need to raise your finger and get put on the list. And please keep your clarifying questions to as brief as possible. Statement of question. So they don't need to be long monologues, They go on and on. Just be very brief as possible so that we continue the conversation amongst all of us as a group. And only 2 people are allowed to ask clarifying questions per speaker. So only 2 people will be allowed to do that. And I think that's it. And this is my time to introduce why I brought this topic. And succinctly, when it was brought to my attention about the Supreme Court's argument of this particular case, it just really jarred me because of the implications of what the Supreme Court may decide to do in this case. It has really, really far-reaching potential repercussions for the indigenous peoples of this country. And it just shocks me that we could give that kind of decision over to the 9 people that are currently on the Supreme Court to decide. A precedent that was set in place many years ago has been working, needed to be in place because of all the history that we have with the indigenous people of this country. And just the thought that it could be overturned is just galling to me. So I wanted to make sure that everybody was I think it really was just my need to make everybody I know aware of the fact that this is out there and that this is potentially going to be decided next year, and just the scary thought that if it is overturned, what that will mean for the indigenous people of this country. Because as one person that it came to my attention when I was listening to As many of you know, I edit Democracy Now! For Play on Co-op Radio here in Austin. And when they brought the story to my attention and they were interviewing a couple of indigenous activists and law specialists, people that help the indigenous communities around the country with legal matters dealing mainly with the United States. And they were talking about the implications of this, and one of them equated it to like pulling the string on a sweater, basically the thread of a sweater, and it's just going to start. And if this one gets pulled out of place, it's just going to continually unravel everything that's been done in the past in regards to the indigenous communities of the United States. So anyway, that's really the main reason I brought it, because I just wanted everybody to be aware of what's going on. I guess I can start taking names for anybody who would like to get on the list at this point. So Beatrice, I see your finger.
Teresa has a hand up.
Yes, and yes, I see your hand up, Teresa. Did you want to just get on the list, or did you have something to say? Okay. Marla. Phyllis. Okay, let me get my timer in place here. I see that's everybody I see here that wants to be on the list. Okay, so we can start with Beatrice.
Okay, my initial, well, first of all, I think about the Iroquois, who I think are the group that thinks about making decisions that affect 7 generations forward. And I think about the audacity of this family to want to overturn a law because it would work well for them with children that they want to adopt. That's how it seems to me. I saw them interviewed. They didn't show the child on the television interview, but I just, that's really what I want to say. I just think the audacity of these people to want to overturn a law that is in place to work for an entire group of people. The idea of a Native child being with Native people makes sense for the child and of course for the group to which it belongs. And it just to me shows more about what supremacy is, that because I want something and it will be good for my family. It doesn't matter that I'm overturning a law that's going to affect so much for so long, or wanting the Supreme Court, and heaven only knows what those 9 people will do. And as an aside, I'm more and more concerned about us having no term limits, about having such a small court. We are really in trouble with this court, and I'm just really concerned about what's going to happen. So I'm done with that.
Thank you, Beatrice. Next on the list is Teresa.
Thank you. I must admit, my stomach kind of dropped when I got to the part that they were evangelical, because among other things, I had read, I think it's pronounced Athea Butler's book, White Evangelical Racism, based on our discussion of her podcast and article about it. I just thought I need a deeper dive of this. I was raised Baptist, so I had no idea about that whole political religious power that's in the United States. So that was the first part, and I just thought, oh, here we go. And they could be nice people. I don't know. They may defy the stereotype. But then I got to the last part of the article, and it was saying something like, well, we can share these kids or whatever, and in the summer we can do that. And I thought, oh, is this the same as, oh, we can go to an ethnic restaurant and enjoy the food? And then I was just the whole, like in the beginning when I found out that they're evangelical, but I was trying to give the benefit of the doubt, and it's like, oh, they could do summers and holidays and dress up in their little, and I thought, nope. I hope they do not succeed. I mean, this is, especially since it would undo precedent law. It's not just a matter of, oh, this white family is adopting a Black child, for example. It's totally a different, and I didn't even realize, so thank you for bringing this to our attention, because originally I was just thinking, well, they do have cross-race adoptions, or whatever that's called, interracial adoptions before, but this has far-reaching effects than just one race of parents adopting a child from another. And of course, in the back of my mind, it's like, oh, white saviorism. Oh, I'm glad that was the last part I had to say. White saviorism. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Next on the list is Marla.
Yes. I got on the list basically to say the same thing as Teresa. I found this quite cringeworthy, especially the part where it says they felt called by their evangelical Christian faith and comfortable circumstances. So, it's money equals power and the way to get what you want. And in this case, they want babies. It also kind of had me take a deeper dive into just adoptions in general, and white folks adopting Black babies, for example. And I did not know, but I was also kind of stunned to find, I guess not stunned, but just again distressing to find that Black babies are far cheaper than white babies. So the adoption process is easier if white folks are trying to adopt a Black baby rather than other white babies. And wow, there's just a lot to unpack here. I think that's it for now, though. Thank you for bringing the article.
Thank you, Marla. Next on the list is Phyllis. Anybody else want to get on the list while we have a break here? I've got Phyllis and Richard, and that's it. Okay, so Phyllis, you can go ahead.
Well, this article has the word social worker in it a lot, and that's what I am. And it's really, it's disturbing to me the way social workers get caught up in institutions and then have to make really difficult, sometimes wrong, ethical choices. It's very disturbing that this couple thinks they have the right to raise children that really are part of a culture that their identified group, the white evangelicals, have really tried to culturally genocide. And it seems like this is just another way to achieve that. The other thing is attachment disorders. That's concerning, meaning if the children are bonded with this white family and then they get moved to the great aunt, or at least the one child, what will that do to her emotional development? And will they have the resources on either side to address that so that, she can work through it with counseling or play therapy or whatever is age appropriate? I don't think the Brackeens have the right to keep the child. I do think that the child's going to need help to adjust to a new family if she gets to go stay with her great aunt, which gladly she does know. So hopefully it won't be super traumatic, but that's just my initial thoughts as a social worker. Thanks.
Thanks, Phyllis. Richard, it's your turn.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that came to me was just what you addressed, Phyllis, is I know you have a background as a social worker, and like with any group or profession, we can't broad brush what the social workers think ought to be done or what's in the best interest in this case, because it's you have Native American social workers who may feel totally different, and you may have Native American Navajo social workers who feel different than Cherokee social workers. So once you get into the weeds on this, it's hard to generalize. But
Teresa?
My other response was to strongly agree with Teresa's, because that was about what I was to say, and what the next person said was that I was kind of neutral on this issue until I read that this family did list their Christian evangelicalism as one of the reasons they wanted to adopt this child. And that, of course, as others have implied, threw in the whole issue about the notorious Christian Indian schools from the past. One of the issues that I have that I think that was unclear from this article was whether the girl in question, whose name I can't remember at the moment, was she initially on a reservation when she was adopted by this family, or was she actually off the reservation? I think besides legal issues, I think this brings up other cultural and social issues as to when it is appropriate for a non-Native American couple to legitimately adopt a Native American or other culturally different person. I mean, there are, of course, many examples of European American parents who have adopted Chinese, Japanese, Asian children. And I'll get back on the list to further this discussion.
Okay, I'll put you back on the list, Richard. Thank you. Teresa is next.
Okay, another thing I was thinking about is this child going to be an outsider in both cultures now? And is she going to be made to feel that she should be grateful because these white people took her in? And am I correct in remembering that her biological mother is an addict, and this is how they keep getting, like, this is the second child of this woman? And I'm wondering what stage she is in her recovery, because it seems like her oldest child, or at least that first child that they have, I think is a son, they full out adopted that child, and I don't know if the biological mother still is able to be in his life, even as, you know, kind of a favorite aunt type of situation or whatever. And now that they're getting this daughter, so the one silver lining I felt was that at least these siblings are together. That's hopefully a positive thing. But at the same time, I was just wondering if they are both being set up to not be appreciated by either culture and to be the outsider in either. And that's a really tricky. I'm not a social worker, so I know Phyllis has a fancy term to call that, but all I could think of is, are they being set up because, oh, they've been saved by this white couple and they're not going to be perceived as white themselves, and when they go around their own people, they're not really going to be culturally of their tribe. So I think that's a loss, because apparently all the adoptive parents wants to do is make sure that they spend summers and eat some of the food and attend the festivals, but that's not quite the same.
Good timing. Anybody else want to get on the list? Richard is next. He's back on the list. Okay, Phyllis, I see you. Anybody else want to turn? Well, I've got to pause here. Okay. Go ahead. Take it off. Take it away, Richard.
Yeah, I still, to me, it's important to know whether the girl was first on the reservation when she was adopted or wasn't, because again, I think this goes beyond just a legal issue, and it gets back to, I think, kind of what Teresa was inferring also too, is, to me, as with so many of these discussions, the main issue is, you know, obviously what's in the best interest of the child. And as a Native American child, you would say, yes, that the best interest is for it to be in a Native American community. But I think superseding that is the best interest of the child is to be in a loving family. And as I read some of the links to the article that you sent us, as particularly in the case of Minnesota, the issue they give the hierarchy that yes, it is important for the child to be in a loving family, but first and foremost, it should be in a Native American family on the reservation in which it was located. But it makes the point, the Minnesota law makes the case that it must be a child that is on the reservation for the hierarchical laws to be in place that give priority to a Native American relative or guardian that should have the child. But if it's off the reservation, this gets into other, it kind of brings up the cultural issues that, yes, the child needs to be reminded of its heritage. No, the child certainly should not be inculcated with a Christian religion. Although that brings up another issue, is that the Christian religion is inherent in much of Indian culture today. As a recent interview of a Native American activist on NPR indicated, and who was herself conflicted over this issue.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Phyllis?
Well, I wanted to add that in school, social workers learn about this law, the ICWA. That's what we called it. And the two licensing exams I had to take both had questions about it, so that it was like they really make sure we get it, that this law requires that Indian Native American children stay with Native American families. It seems like the question, I'm trying to make sense of it, whether or not the child was on or off the reservation, like at what point when they were born, if the mother left the reservation, if the mother was off the reservation for some reason when she had the child. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of complications in that would have to be looked at. And is it a way to try to force Native people to stay on reservations? Because not every Native person lives on a reservation. They sometimes live in cities or towns or have farms or, whatever. And I just question why that issue is so important. To me, it's more important the
Glenn.
heritage of the mother and or father, their cultural and their association with the tribal nations. Thanks.
Thanks, Phyllis. I've just got Glenn. So Glenn, if you'd like to go ahead.
Well, it seems like there's a lot involved. If the Indians believe that if you take away that law from them, that's part of their treaty, then you can take away other parts of the treaty, mineral rights and other land rights. So that's what they feel is at stake. But now, if a child is born and the baby has drugs in his body and the mother is still a drug addict, and you want to you would rather see that child put in that condition than be with a white family. I don't think that would be good. Although I don't like all these adoptions that happen. Especially, I don't care for the adoptions where two men gonna raise a child. Then adoption agency open up for that kind of stuff. But like I say, but in the child that's in question, I would give that some kind of consideration, because when a person start raising another human being, you fall in love with that human being. You form a strong bond and attachment, especially from a baby. If you're bringing it up from a baby, You know, that's kind of hard on those people that are bringing that child up. They just give it up without a fight. That's all I have to say for now.
Thanks, Glenn. Next is Francie.
I just really have a question, and that is, how do people like us have an effect and any influence on the court to let our opinions be known about other people's business, so to speak, so that we don't have another Dobbs case where the majority of Americans disagree with the decision? How do we, is there a way we can affect the outcome of this case, other than wait until another cycle and elect other people so that they appoint different, that could take a couple of decades. So does anybody know? Does anybody have any ideas? That's all I want to ask.
Thanks. And I see your hand, Beatrice. So, and I don't have anybody else on the list, so go ahead.
This is so very complicated. I am concerned about the worldview of these people who have determined that because of what they have and what they feel they've been called to do, they can present a case to overturn a law. I find that audacious. The other thing, when you think of the other part, I guess, is that if the children that are part of their family, one can understand their emotional attachment, but what ultimately is the best for the future of the child going down generations, going down the line? What is the best? And that should be the determining factor. To have a child come sometimes in and out, dipping water in dipping their foot in the water of the culture is not a good solution to what is best for the child. I just cannot stop being overwhelmed that these people would want to follow this and overturn a law that is going to affect the lives for so long of indigenous people, so much like the metaphor for pulling the string. It's just tiring that people can feel that they're called upon to do something that will affect so much for so long. Where did you get the nerve to think that, the audacity of this? I just have concerns about that. And I appreciate what people are saying in terms of, perspective of social workers. And I know that it's a difficult decision for people who have to follow a law. But in the end, what is the value of this child's life and that child's future? And who are these people, these parents, these adoptive parents who think that because they are who they are and what they have, they can bring this case? It's troubling and hurtful and worrisome. And where does it go from here?
Thank you, Beatrice. Phyllis, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm not sure if the Supreme Court is going to decide what's best for the child, or if they're going to decide if the law, the ICWA law, is constitutional, or if, whatever, if the precedent will stand. I don't know that the Supreme Court does family law, which is the kind of court that would determine the best interest of a child. And I hope nobody thought I was justifying any social worker who, doesn't stand up to some system that is oppressive, and this came to my mind when Texas social workers were being expected to out families who were supporting their transgender children. I was like, oh no, they should not do that. So it's complicated, yes. I am not surprised that a white family would think that their interest supersedes the precedent for entire nations of people. Americans do that all the time, white Americans. So that's all for now.
Okay, I think Nora had a clarifying question to ask.
Phyllis, can you just remind us what that acronym stands for?
Which one?
The ICWA.
The ICWA?
The Indian Child Welfare Act. That's what the law is that the article's talking about.
Okay, anybody else want to get on? I just took Richard down. He'll be next. Anybody else want to get on the list while I've got a pause here? Okay, go ahead, Richard.
Well, I agree with what you said, Phyllis, up until, as you might not be surprised to hear me being concerned that we as a group can really know what's in the minds of the is it the Burkeen family that is wanting to hold on to this child. I mean, to me, their quote whiteness unquote is frankly irrelevant. To me, it's more in the issue of what's in the interest of this child. Yes, the child needs, but she's still a very young child. So at this point in her, for the next 2 or 3 years, I think that if she's in a truly loving family, and yes, the fact that this is evangelical Christian family concerns me. It would be definitely a concern if the child is being, if she's being, I'm trying to think of the right word. If the evangelical Christian aspect of this family is the predominant feature of her life, but if it's a loving family, the fact that it's quote a white family is irrelevant. And we don't really know what's in the minds of this family, and they didn't intend to bring it before the Supreme Court. It's gone through many other courts before it got to this point. I guess that was my original point. Is they didn't intend to overturn precedent. It's come to this point, but it probably started off in a local court, like most cases that go before the Supreme Court do. Okay.
Thanks. Larry?
Thank you. I keep hearing the term that they're a white evangelical family, as if there's some kind of a demonic possessed people. What if this family were Jewish? What if they were Muslims? What if they were atheists? I don't know why white evangelical would stand out as being so wrong. I've had discussions amongst Black people when white people may have adopted a black child. My point is, would it be better to be adopted into a loving family or to stay housed in a foster care agency where you're just a number? And I think my argument would be to be adopted into a loving family. I think the family would have a responsibility to make this child aware of its culture, its upbringing, its history. The same if a white person were to adopt a Black kid, they would have a responsibility to make this child aware of his history and its culture and its upbringing. So, relative to the Supreme Court has reversed a lot of decisions that it considered to be wrong. Plessy versus Ferguson, Dred Scott decision. So Supreme Court may not always get it right, but the Supreme Court is the final law of the land. And here I wouldn't dismiss the couple just because they're so-called white evangelical. Would they be able to give this child love? I think that's the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next up is Marla.
Yeah, I don't think it's that white evangelical Christians are demonic or evil. It's when they use their religion as a weapon as these folks sound like they are doing, and they're using their money coupled with that religion to get what
Teresa.
they want, which is this child. So I just wanted to clarify, I think that's more what's happening in coupling the religion factor with the white factor with the big money factor. I mean, their comfortable lifestyle called them to rescue children who didn't have what they needed, which is, they can give them that. I don't know, there's a whole white saviorism thing going on here, and it's just cringeworthy to me in multiple respects. I also put a link in the chat, kind of a long blog from the Supreme Court of what transpired on November 9th with the actual case. So that's it.
Thanks so much, Marla. Thanks for that link. Next up on the list, I've got Glenn and I've got Teresa. So anybody else want to get on the list? We've got about 10 more minutes and then I'm going to close the list. Okay, I see you, Mom. Anybody else? Okay. So Glenn, go ahead.
Well, I remember African Americans were raising a lot of anger over whites adopting blacks. It stopped because you see that a lot, that the whites are adopting black children. Now, if you don't want them to adopt them, well, you should adopt them. That's your race, you adopt them. But we don't want to adopt them. Some of us can afford to adopt them, but we don't want to do adoptions. We want less children. We want birth control. We want this and that. We don't. And so if the Indians are not able to provide a life for those children, well, they should allow it. They should allow others until they are able to be able to do that, or those that among them that can afford to do it, do it. So something is quite wrong where you got them all in foster care, and if you don't want them in foster care, you can adopt them yourself. But if you're gonna put them in a condition where the parents are alcoholic and the parents are on crack, and you're going to destroy that life. You rather them have a destroyed life or a life where they can reach a sense of themselves accomplishments. That's how I'm looking at it. Thank you.
Good timing. Okay, so next on the list is Teresa.
Okay, I just want to share this story that one of my I used to be a teacher, and one of my fellow teachers was Korean, and she was adopted by German parents. And when she was a little girl and just had to be a preschool age child, she saw, according to her, for the first time in her life, some Asian people, and she started laughing and making this racist gesture in her mind, because she thought she looked like her German parents. She had never really seen her reflection. Asian eyes. And her German parents were horrified. Here they have this Korean child who's teasing other Asians and making this racist gesture. And when they saw her doing that, they made a point to show her reflection, because in her mind, she looked like her parents, even though clearly they were German and she was Korean. She said when she saw that, it was like an existential crisis. She didn't know what, the term, of course, existential crisis. So the whole dismissive of, well, you know, it doesn't matter what race it is. Yes, it does. We all experience the world based on what we look like. Unfortunately, we can say, well, it's the content of your character. People are going to know your character sight unseen, just like she didn't even know what she looked like because her assumption was that she was German. I mean, culturally, yes, she was German. She's fluent in German and English. I don't even know if she speaks much Korean, but it does make a difference. It is a factor, and I think of that teacher who I taught with going through that when she was not quite a toddler, but definitely preschool age and verbal and talking. And her parents had to explain to her that she was Asian. And, you know, so there's that.
Thank you, Teresa. Next on my list is Francie.
I feel like I didn't understand the article or something. I thought the real significance was whether this was going to set a precedent about the politics of the Indian nation versus the race of people, and that if the court were to rule, and Marla, I wished I had read this link that you have given us because it may answer my question. But it's really about the Indian nation's autonomy from white people that's on the line more than whether we can have cross-racial adoptions. Am I wrong? I'm kind of confused that like we've gotten off on what's best for the child. We all want what's best for the child, I think, but this is a bigger issue than this one child, isn't it? Am I wrong? Somebody help.
Okay, thanks. So it is 10:56. Phyllis needs to leave at 11:30 today, sharp. So that means our recording has to end then. And so I'm trying to keep it within our time span at that point so we can let Phyllis leave. So I'm going to close the list at this point. And right now on the list, I can add one more person if anybody wants to get on the list after I read who's still on. So right now on the list is Pedro, Amal, and Greer. If anybody wants to jump on here as the last speaker, please do so. Otherwise, we're going to do the wrap up after we get through these three people. Okay, so next on the list is Pedro. Go ahead.
Yeah, kind of towards Francis' question, but I was perplexing me too, where we focus on the child rather than focusing on the culture, maybe, in the subcultures. It seems like the material wherewithal to raise a family is so important. And it's disproportionately people of color don't have access to that material types of advantages that other families have. I think removing a child from a family in which they then lose the opportunity to be brought up with the cultural influences that traditionally is part of their spirit or whatever it's just another crime of these rampant rates of poverty and disenfranchisement. It seems like there's some type of reparations that we should be that it would be more interesting or more productive in order to create a way in which families with great intentions could help fund and adopt a whole family in a sense, in a financial way. In fact, part of their inheritance or their monies that they leave for the next generation would go in a way to maybe help correct, those things into the future or whatever. But taking the child and bringing them up, it's easy to see that what's in the best interest of the child, but that's the insidiousness of the system, is that it gives you such poor alternatives, and the system needs to change so we have better alternatives than the ones that have been mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Next on the list is Amal.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. My concern with this situation is sort of through the lens that Teresa was describing the Korean girl, is that, unfortunately, we live in a world where we see things through white lenses. And this child being raised in this home will not have a cultural identity to see the world through the Native American eye. She will see the world through the lens of white people, Christian people, evangelical people. That may not be a part of her culture, her personal cultural identity. So this is when people start to weigh, well, would you rather her be in a Native American home where the parents are alcoholic, or in a home where I'd rather her be amongst her people? And whatever struggles her people have, she may be there to help them with that. Don't make it out like being in the evangelical Christian world is such better, is a such better environment. That doesn't mean evangelical Christian doesn't equal better, and white doesn't equal better. And these people talk about their big home and the swimming pool and everything that they had as almost like a slight to the way Native Americans live, not without understanding the historical ramifications about why they end up on reservations. So that's my problem with that. I don't have a problem with evangelical Christians. What I do have a problem with is historically, it was white evangelical Christians who have removed Native American children from their parents, giving them, quote, Christian names, identities, cutting the Native American boys' hair, which went against Native American culture, and placing them in environments that were not culturally theirs. PBS did a wonderful documentary on this, and I can't remember the name of it, but it had to do with how Native American children had been historically removed from their tribal ordinance and from their parents, given, quote, Christian names and their haircut and all of this craziness. So that's my problem with this situation. This child will go out into the world with no cultural identity, and that will kill the child worse than anything else.
Thank you, Amal. And last we have Greer.
I think this is bigger than the child. Yes, the child is a part of this, but this is bigger than this child, because this throws in an imbalance should these parents win, because this changes a lot of things. Your border laws are going to change. Everything on a reservation will be in question. They created a Child Welfare Act in '78 to protect these children when they went into foster care. So when they became able to be added to the tribe, if they went to foster care, the first place they would most likely be placed is within the tribe. So if, again, they went, tribal health care benefits are going to come into question, educational benefit, criminal law on the reservation, and rights for fishing, hunting, all and gaming. I think this is more so a way to destroy what has been set up than to actually protect this child, because I believe the child should be with her people. But the bigger question here is, why are the people doing so bad that you had to enact a law to protect them? It's due to colonizations and whites coming to this country, just trying to basically do genocide to these people. If you look at Australia, look at Greenland, look at every place where there's indigenous people that's been colonized, what has happened to the children. Hell, you can look at African Americans due to slavery, what happened to us. This is bigger than this one child. This will definitely make every treaty and every law on them as a sovereign nation come into question. That's it. Thank you.
Good timing, Greer. Okay, as I said, we need to wrap up by 11:30, so I'm going to start the wrap up now, and give everybody who did not get a chance to speak 2 minutes to talk if they would like to, and then everybody else the chance to give 1 more minute of commentary here. So the 3 people I recognized as not speaking during the meeting were Nora, Louise, and Marba. Did I miss anybody? I think everybody else did have an opportunity to speak. Okay, and I see that Reverend Larry dropped off, so we're down a person. Okay, so let's go in that order. Nora, if you'd like to say something, go right ahead.
Thank you, Francie, for kind of bringing the focus back to what I was kind of more confused or just not very educated about, beyond the best interest of the child. And I thought, Pedro, your comment about adopting the whole family was brilliant, and wish there was more thinking along those lines. Great discussion, and gave me something more to read up on. Thanks.
Thanks, Nora. Louise.
I don't have much more to add, and to take it back to the welfare of the child, yeah, it's really important to have 2, well, no, not even 2. What am I talking about? A loving home. And if it is 2 people, whether it's 2 women, 2 men, or whatever it is, if it's a loving, caring home. And that's what Reverend, and I think someone else, Glenn, maybe said, that it's really important to have that loving home. Yeah, I agree with that. And then it made me think about if a white family is raising a African American child, I mean, there are certain things that we've established in these meetings many, many times that, a young African American boy in particular, it needs to be educated on and taught and warned about. So that just brought that into my head, made me think about that. Obviously, love is more important, but anyway, just something to think about. Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. And last for the 2 minutes is Marva, or however long, really, because I've given Nora and Louise enough time too. More time, I should say.
Thank you for great article. I hear on TV, in the news media, more focus have been given to the Native Americans as in my past and in my childhood and my young adulthood, and never thought about it until recently. I say, if you're gonna adopt these children, teach them about the history, and it is important where the heritage, where they came from in the history, and it's just as important as the loving home environment. Thank you for all your information and thoughts on it.
Thank you, Marva. And so let's see, we're going to the wrap up of everybody else. And again, I'm going to take it from my screen, the order on my screen, to start those with. And so Phyllis, you would go first.
Yeah, I agree that a loving home of any combination of 2 men, 2 women, a single mom, a single dad, a straight cis het couple, that was redundant, um, is important. But also I wouldn't leave it up to a white couple to educate on Black history or Native American history. I would want that child exposed to members of those cultures so that they could learn directly and get the truth. Also, my problem with evangelical Christianity of any race is that they have sort of this idea that their way is the only correct way to be. And that is partly why I think they want to adopt children from non-Christian communities, so that they can get more Christians. And that's what I oppose. And unfortunately, someone has left too early to hear that. But thank you very much, Michelle. You are like a veteran facilitator now. You're like so smooth. And this was a good topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on my screen here is Richard.
Yes, I have to agree with you, Phyllis, that back to the red flag that several of us mentioned at the outset, that they did mention their evangelical Christian background as a main reason for wanting to adopt this child. That being said, I still get back to what several of us had talked about earlier, and that yes, this is an important case now. It's before the Supreme Court, but ultimately, what's in the best interest of a 4-year-old child is frankly not its Native American heritage as a 4-year-old, but that it's in a loving family so that it can grow up. And by the time it begins to understand what a Native American cultural heritage is all about, that it's in a place where if it feels like it, if she wants to either move back with a Native American community or move back into a reservation context, that she can do it. And she's at the same time, she still has loving parents who would support her in that. So it's a combination. And to the extent that the racism is aspirational, yes, the content of our character, although it's hard to perceive, should be at the forefront of what we're all about. And yes, we can't ignore racial differences, but the content of the character does matter. And we are, I believe, an aspirational group of racism trying to eliminate racist behavior. So it is a loving family that's at the forefront of this, and provided that the evangelical Christian aspect of it is not a sledgehammer in her upbringing. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Teresa.
Thank you. Now, it seems like people were being really politically correct when you say, well, just loving family. I just want to say that I am straight, child-free by choice, but I have read several different places that the best parents are lesbians. I don't know. But, maybe we could do a deep dive on which combination of parents are the best. But I really enjoyed this article and just the implications. Every other day, I think our Constitution is being shredded, and it's not going to be anything new if once again another treaty that was signed with Native Americans is broken. So this is very cringeworthy on that, because there's been precedence on that. So that's it.
Thanks, Teresa. Marla.
I don't have anything else to add. A great discussion, lots of things to think about. So hope everybody has a great weekend, and thanks for the article, Michelle.
Thank you, Marla. Pedro?
Yeah, first, thanks for the link, Marla. Also, I think the issue is, bringing up a child in a materially comfortable area, and then they can go search out this Native American heritage when it's time. It is a naive thinking, in that the child is shaped by the family they grow up with. So when they're not growing up with the family that respects the cultural heritage and transmutes that to them, then they are a changed person, and then their aspirations become change. And so the other thing, just, we are played emotionally in order to avoid the root cause of these problems. So I was really taken by Gigi's comment that it's bigger than the child. It really is. We talk about the child and it distracts us from the root causes, which is the nature of how this system keeps us from ever being able to, lift ourselves out and see these disheartening inequities for what they are. But very complicated issue as always, and great job. And thank you for the mentoring the presentation, Michelle.
Thank you, Pedro. It's good to see you. Francie.
Well, you caught me copying down all that stuff that Marla gave us. I liked Pedro's idea about families supporting other families. Yesterday when I came home, I think that there was an eviction going on across the street and down a couple of houses. And I wanted to go over and say, what do you need to get back in the house? This is not a good day to be out on with all your stuff in the yard. It was kind of awful. And this is a middle class neighborhood that the majority of people can't afford the houses here. And it had to be an eviction with everything out in the yard. We've got to figure this out. And it's maybe has nothing to do with this child in this court case, but it does. I think it does have something to do with it. Anyway, I don't have anything particular to add about the article at this point.
Thanks, Mom. You're right. That's terrible. Beatrice, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation, and I was thinking, just as Teresa is, that this case is an example of how Indigenous people have been treated since the colonizers came here, and we cannot separate this situation and what's going on with this child from the total picture of what the circumstances of people are, the genocide, the taking of lands, all of that. And I understand how this worked its way through the Supreme Court, not having gone through other courts, but just the concern for this individual child is to telescope, to make an issue that is really a large issue, a small one, and it's not. And no one would question the value of being in a loving home and all of these things. And so much of what we've had in this conversation has been helpful and informative. But I don't think we need to lose the value of looking at historical precedents and what has happened to a group of people, and how this will be just another knife in the back of the people who took care of these lands before we came here. Our land acknowledgement tells us that. And so I find it disturbing that these parents, in their concern for their particular child, are not able to see beyond what would be good, they think, for them and their family. But it's great discussion, great facilitating, and good article. And thanks. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you, Beatrice. It's nice to see you too. Let's see, next on the screen is Glenn.
Well, I don't believe that that because what has happened to you in the past, that you yourself cannot change your condition. Waiting on the people who oppress you to change your condition. And the Indians are not they're really in a good position to make a comeback. They didn't lose everything. They didn't lose the knowledge of who they were, their ancestry. They didn't lose all of that, their connection with their ancestry. They didn't lose all of their land. They still got millions of acres of land. So they're in a good position to make a comeback. They just got to have the will to come back. And I hope that I hope they win their case. I got a minute left. That's it. That's all right.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.
Amal?
Yeah, article definitely. I think that the United States, its Supreme Court, its social workers, and all of these other things coming out need to stay out of indigenous people's business. This child's adoption should be something that should be taken care of in-house, and whatever the tribe decides, it's what should be in the best interest of that child, not what the white United States governmental structure decides. They need to stay up out of it. And that's been the historical problem, is that the United States always want to butt in with their laws and with their government and with their Supreme Courts in other people's business. This is a Native American issue. This ain't got nothing to do with white folk. So once they stay out of people's business, then that's what's in the best interest of the child. And as far as the parenting, no children shouldn't be in no two daddy, two mommy homes. Negative on that. Ain't no balance in that.
And last but not least is Greer. Greer, are you there? Because I can't hear you. If you can't, and we can't hear you, you're still on mute. Well, if you can you put something in the chat maybe, Greer, to let us know what's going on? Okay.
Cool.
Well, oh, I could hear you briefly. You there? Your square is green on my computer, but I can't hear anything. Can anybody else hear? Feel free to butt in when you get your audio back, Greer. Oh, she just dropped off. Maybe she's going to try and rejoin.
Graham's here. She's going to speak from my computer.
Okay, great.
Okay, my thing is foster parents go in knowing that there's a potential that they can't adopt these kids. And especially being that this child is part Native American, they knew their limitations. They knew the issues that they would have. This is about, I'm having it my way and I want what I want because I want what I want and I'm going to go to court to fight for the right to be wrong. Whites have always gotten a benefit versus the situation that created the problem that caused this child to actually be in foster care. It's the treatment of the Native Americans that caused this child to be in foster care. So I hope that if they want to keep fostering the child, I don't think they have a better. That's it.
Thanks, Greer. I had a hard time kind of understanding some of what you said, but
okay. Can I say it again?
Can she say it again?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
She does. She needs to be closer, not louder.
Okay.
Radio. No. Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the foster care comes with certain regulations. It's not guaranteed that you can adopt the child. That means you're just fostering the child.
You're not understandable.
You can't hear.
You're just
You can
breaking
hear
up
you,
is the
but you're not
problem.
understandable.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Can you hear me now?
It's
Not
not
really.
hearing, you can't understand. It's not clear. It's not that we can't hear you. The sound is fine, but you're garbled.
Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Can you hear me now?
It's like it's going in and out of, you know, as Beatrice said, it's not the loudness, it's the clarity of the.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. When you foster a child, there's limitation to what you can do. Not necessarily that you can actually adopt a child. So when these people went into this agreement to foster this child, they already knew it. And they knew that there was a chance that they couldn't adopt a child because of the tribal issue. This is about wanting what you want versus the rules that were set in place to protect this child. So my thing is with this, I hope the child has a loving home. And if the parents are only allowed to foster, then so be it. Because the tribe has a right to weigh in on the rights of one of its members. So when you want to change rules to suit your own personal gain, then in essence, that's a problem for me. This child should remain a member of the tribe and she should be a part of that tribe. And not necessarily just because situations dictating how she's raised, but we have to look at the greater picture. Why are these Indians in such bad shape? And all we have to do is look back to history. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Greer. Thanks for sticking with us. So that's the end. And, you know, I have a couple of comments to make. I know we're short on time here. Phyllis needs to leave pretty quickly here. But I do want to point out that in the article that I sent, I think there was one sentence in the article that made it pretty clear that this couple that brought this case, yes, it started in the lower courts, but the intent was to dismantle the ICWA. That was the intent because they said it was too difficult for them to adopt this child. Therefore, ICWA, basically saying ICWA is an impediment to us being able to adopt this child. And it's an impediment to anybody who wants to come in here and adopt an indigenous child in the United States. So that was the intent when they brought this case, was to dismantle ICWA so that it no longer existed and no longer was the impediment for other couples, whether they be white or not, to adopt a Native American child. Then, you know, that's most likely who's going to be doing it, white people. And I want to say that based on some other research that I've done when I was still doing my program on civil rights and wrongs on Co-op Radio, I did a show where I interviewed several adoption activists and people who were very knowledgeable about adoption law and the adoption industry itself. And I just say that the adoption industry is a for-profit entity in this country. It's a for-profit entity, and it has been since its inception here in the United States. And, you know, who began it? It's white people, and for white supremacists and for white profit. And it has been, and it's never changed. And that's the way it's always going to be until it's changed fundamentally from how it exists today. And I can't help but wonder, like, why, if we have all this money that's in the adoption industry in this country, why we can't refocus that money and that industry and that the resources there to keeping families together. I don't understand that. So instead of having an adoption and a foster care system, pour money into helping the parents that are struggling, the parents that have issues, the parents that need rehabilitation, the parents that need the help and the assistance to get better so that they can keep their children. If they need assistance in parenting and understanding that, then, you know, I think that should be the number one priority of this country in our societies, to keeping these families together. And then when that all else fails there, then you can go to adoption or fostering. And I think that the child should definitely be kept with their family. I think family is so important, and understanding where you came from. And if you're, you know, can't be raised by your mother or your father or your sister or your brother or your aunt or your uncle, you know, at least keep going. There's got to be a cousin someplace along the line. And if you can give the support to that cousin so that they can keep the child in the family, I think that's the way to go personally. So I like Pedro's idea about, you know, adopting a family. Well, I would say adopt the family that the child came from and help that family to keep that child where it belongs. So, you know, the industry was just created under false pretenses, and it needs to be dismantled and recreated in a much different way. But our country, under its white supremacist rule and everything, is never going to see that. So that's my soapbox rant. Anyway, so do we have any announcements? I know that's